Well, welcome back to another modeling time with me, Brian Banna. In the last episode, we talked about the freight car that I'm going to build, and I talked about cleaning up all the flash and all the parts, putting weight in it, and gluing it all back together. So I've done that. So that's all done. So the weight's not moving around on the inside. Everything's good. Now, I'm not going to remove the roof walk yet because I need that roof walk as support for when the mill presses on the top of the car. I did glue the car together, so now I can put a block in here, and the mill can push, or the vise can push on there and on the roof walk area. Now the roof walk is supported with a bunch of roof walk supports, so I can actually put a little bit of pressure on that and it'll be okay. So in this episode, we're gonna start removing the ribs. So what I'll do is I'll set the camera up over at the mill and we'll maybe remove one or two ribs so you can see the process in action. I did build a little tool, a rib spacing tool, so we'll go over that when I get to putting on the channels. So let me get the camera set up over at the mill, get everything set in place, and we'll get working on this thing. All right, I've got the car set up in the vise, and it's sitting on a set of parallels. And the reason it's sitting on a set of parallels is because this roof eave sticks out just a little bit more than the ribs. Now, if I were to set this on the bed of the vise, then the car would be slightly tilted a little bit and I wouldn't get a nice perpendicular cut. It's not to say that this side isn't perfect. There will be, on the last car that I was doing, it was lower, or it was higher at the top than it was at the bottom, but not by much. And I have a way of taking care of that. So we're going to mill off, let's say, this rib and this rib, so you can get an idea of the operation. So I'll zoom in, and it might get a little bit loud because the mill does make noise, the gears. It's gear driven, it's not belt driven. Let's see, that should do it. It's all still in focus. Yeah, okay. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to go at, oh, I got to plug it in first, of course. I'm going to go at full speed. I like to go at full speed because it lessens the chance of this bit grabbing anything. I mean, it's not going to. This is a very, very sharp bit. It's a 16th inch bit. The vise is finger tight, nothing's bowing. It's pressing up against the roof walk and the bottom of the gates. So everything's very, very firm. It's not moving anywhere in this vise. So everything's cool. And if I press on it, it flexes in, but it doesn't flex out. It doesn't push back out. Real quick, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start from this side, and I walk the bit down until it's right at the surface, and then I'll start cutting along the rib. Okay, let me get a pointer out here. You see this bit of slough right here? That is the bit cutting into the side of the car just a little bit. Now if you look down here, this is all raised surface. So you can see that the top of the car is higher than the low of the bottom of the car. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the bit over here, and then I'm just going to manually start cutting down. I'll raise the bit, come back here, and just start manually cutting down. What I mean by manually cutting down, as I'm bringing the bit this way, I'll be lowering it a little bit just to cut this out. Alright, so that's one rib taken off. We'll clean that up at the workbench. I'll do one more, and then I'll go ahead and turn the camera off and finish the rest of them. And then we'll go back to the workbench, and I'll show you how I clean everything up. So let's just do one more. Now real quick on how I do the manual cutting. If you see, let me see if you can see, there's an edge, right? Let me get this off of there. There's an edge right here. That's the edge of the detail I want to cut off. Now what I do is I overhang the bit just a little bit, about a quarter of the bit on the other side of the edge that I don't want to cut. And I'll manually lower the bit, and as long as I don't see this side, the overhang part, cutting into the car body, then I know then I know I'm cutting to the right depth. So I can just go back and do it again. But as soon as I see it cutting into the side of the car body, then I have to stop and readjust. And there you see how I mill off the ribs, how I use the mill to take the ribs down. Now you could do that with a chisel blade, you could just slice along there and get it off, but since I have the mill, I like using it, and it works really well. We'll come back and clean all that up with scraping and sanding after I get all this done. So that takes care of explaining and showing how I use the mill to clean off these ribs. Okay, I've got the sides all cut off, and there's still some weld seams. Those will get scraped off. Let me zoom in a little bit here. There we go. So now you can see where the ribs used to be, and it's time to clean the rest of that off down to the surface of the car. What I do is I use a small chisel blade. I got this blade at Micromark. I got the handle at Micromark. I got the blades at a company called Neville. Oh, I'm sorry, not Neville. Havells. I tried going back to this site. They're still there, but they seem to not have the shopping cart available. So you might have to call them to order them. But they also sell this handle. They sell the handle, they sell other knife handles, surgical blades and stuff, but this is a great little tool. And it's havels.com, I believe. Yeah. So anyway, when I work on a new car, I always use a new blade. That goes for this, if I'm using this, and that goes for these. I need to get some more 100 packs of these blades. But anyways, to start with, so I'm going to put the blade, see if I can get this on camera. Let me see, is it on camera? Let me try to move this camera around or move the car in a position that I can show this. But anyways, I'll put the blade perpendicular to the car, and I'll just start scraping. I want to make sure that the whole edge of the blade stays on the car. If I tilt it any, I'm going to start creating a channel or a gouge. So I'm going to do it lightly, and if you look at the car in the light, there we go. You see these shiny edges? What I want to do is I want to lightly scrape till that edge disappears, and I slightly scrape into the surface of the side of the car, and that'll let me know that I've got all this down to the same level. So I'll come in here again, get this going. And that one is pretty much taken care of. I have to get the bottom and the top, but I wanted to show you what I do and how I do that. When I'm all done scraping, I'll take a sanding stick and wet sand the whole side of this car. I'm not worried about these little tabs that stick off here and at the top. Those are going to get cut off when I do the channel. The channel overlaps this bottom sill and this very small little top reinforcement strip. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all scraped off, then I'll sand it, and we'll come back and see how it looks, and we'll get started on putting the channels in. Alright, so I've got the ribs scraped, and I've got the whole side sanded. I've trimmed off the rib sections from the bottom sill, and I've trimmed them off from the top. I've set in the first rib, and that one's really easy. Let me turn this around real quick. Let me zoom in on something here. Okay, this line right there, that lines up with the edge of the car body. It's the same on both ends. So this rib's really easy to do, and because I trimmed off all of the rib sections from the bottom sill and the top, I can lay this piece in here. I can tack glue it at the top, lay it along the edge, mark the, well actually let me step back first. The nice thing about this blade is it is pretty much the same width as these ribs. So if I take the edge of the blade right along that line, I can trim that strip that runs along the top of the eave, right under the eave, and then I can set this channel in flat. I can run it along the edge, and I can tack it in at the top. I can take my number 11 blade and I can mark where I need to trim the sill so that this will lay flat. Then I can come back, pull that off, come back, trim the sill, and then glue this piece in. Now this plastic is not necessarily liquid cement friendly. It's hard, so the cement doesn't get into it much. So I can tack it in and it'll come off real easy. In order to glue these in, I have to use a lot of cement along there to really soften underneath there. So after I set this in, I put a lot of glue in there and I let it soften and then set. I press on it just a little bit, but not enough to ooze out on the sides. And so I let that set. So I just put it aside and go do something else and let it set. I trim these, just past the sill because I'll use the mill to trim them off even with the bottom. So now that I've got this set in, and I'm going to work into the middle and then into the middle. The middle rib or the middle channel will be the last one that goes in. Now I made this tool so that it has a notch in it here that goes over the bottom sill, and it has a notch in it at the top to fit the support under the eave. So that is my spacing for the ribs. Now I'm keeping my fingers crossed that works. Theoretically it should work, because from this edge to this edge is 3.615 inches. So there's 9 ribs. So I'm sorry. So it's 3.615 from the edges. Each one of these pieces is 0.1 inches wide. Now 8 inches is 0.092, but there's a slight draft angle in it that pulls it out to 0.1. Now if you want it to be exactly 8 inches, then you could just sand the edges down, which I'm not going to bother to do. So it's 3.615. There's 9 ribs, so it's minus 0.9 gives you 2.715 total in area between each rib. So there's 8 ribs, so you divide that 2.715 by 8 and you get 0.339. So this is exactly 0.339 wide. So like I said, theoretically it should work. On this car, it does work. So I put it in there. Now this car, I did all the measuring. I did all the measuring with a scale ruler, with this. So, but it seems to work out. So that's snug in there. That one's snug in there. That one's snug in there. That one's snug in there. This one has just a little bit of play. This one doesn't fit quite because that one has play. That one fits. pretty much, and that one fits pretty much too. So with the differences in these that don't allow this to fit means to me that if I were to use something like this, these would have been perfect all the way across. Put that back. So I am going to trust this, I hope. And so we'll lay that in. So now that I've let this set up, the glue won't stick to this. So if I lay that in there, well, I put the camera in a new position, so maybe I can show a little bit better the modeling, because I'm working on this side and the camera's shooting from this side, so you can be able to see things maybe a little bit better. So I've got the two channels in here. I've got all of these in over here. And as I mentioned before, this channel is pretty easy. Just line it up with the line that's up here and then this edge. And then I'll know where to cut and all that. So getting that one in is easy. Then I'll put this tool in there. I'll get the other one set up. So let's do a whole rib here. So now that this one's set up, I've let the glue dry a little bit. So we're going to put the tool right in here. First off, I need to make sure there's no plastic that oozed out, and if there is, and there is just a little bit there, that'll mess up the actually, I don't even want to clean that up yet. I want to let that dry real good. So what I should do is on the tool, I'll just slightly chamfer these two edges so that I don't have to worry about that. So if I just take a sanding stick, and I'll just break the edge, and that will clear any of the plastic that oozed out. Let me just scrape that down a little bit. There we go. Now, it should be, oh, there we go, perfect. Okay, so that fits up there real good. So, like I explained earlier, let me do it. So, the knife is slightly angled lower here than here. So I want the high side up against the tool. Alright. And we're just going to cut right into that reinforcing piece and snap it up. There we go. So that takes care of that. The last time I showed this knife, I didn't have a new blade. Now I always say I start with a new blade because it wasn't cutting well. So now I got a new blade in here. I'm going to pull this tool against this edge. And I'm going to put the blade right up against the tool and just wiggle it down. And it'll give me a nice line right there. And I'll put the knife in there and just wiggle it some more. There we go. Now I need should have got this ready in the beginning, but something I want to show you on these things too. Okay, this is, the channel I'm using is Plastruct. And on the back of each one of these pieces, you'll notice, see if we can see it in the camera here, there's a little pimple right there. There's one there, a little one there. Oh no, that's just a piece of shaving. There's one there and one there. Some of these stick out from the surface, so you want to make sure that that's not like that. This one does here. So otherwise when you go to lay it down, it's going to make the channel raise up. There we go. Alright, so a new piece, so the end is fairly straight, but it kind of angles out, and I don't want that. So we're going to do our little cut here. There. me check that. Need a little, angle it in, just so it's angling out in the back, just a little bit. I don't want that. Otherwise there'll be a gap at the top. So I'll angle the tool or the knife slightly in. See what we got here. Okay, that one's straight. Alright, so now, see where we at. There we go. So now I can put that up in the notch and I can trim it on the bottom. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure that there's no, when you trim that, there's no pieces that flare out on either side. Otherwise it'll cause the not be straight up against the tool. So now we'll put the tool back in, locks in place. This should fit into that notch. And now, let me push this up against the side there. Oh, it's kind of, there we go. And now, take this knife and make our line right there. There we go. So now, what I'll do, keep everything checking, make sure I'm on this camera. There we go. I'm going to slide the knife right up in there and probably poke my finger. There we go. There we go. Now, I'll just slice that out. Just like I showed in the last one. Be very careful not to cut any further than that line. And now that I got the notch cut out, I can clean it down to be even with the face of the car side. The nice thing about having sharp knives is they scrape real nicely. Get that little piece of slough off of there. Alright. Where's my rib? Let me just make sure it fits properly. Yep. Alright, now let's make sure the tool, everything's perpendicular, or parallel with the tool. That looks pretty darn good. Everything's in. Take some glue, tack it in place. There we go. And then lift it. And then we're going to put lots of glue underneath it. I'm going to put some more on this side. Like I said, the Plastrock plastic is fine. It's the Atlas plastic that's not friendly to the glue. There we go. And that takes care of that rib. Now when you press down on this, if any of the plastic oozes out, that's okay. When it cures fully, just take the chisel blade and we'll just scrape right up the edge on both sides and then go perpendicular on both sides. So that takes care of that one. I just want to make sure it's there. Okay. That's it. Now I'll let that set up. And I'll do this last one, and then I'll do the middle one. So there you saw a full process on putting in a rib. Okay, so all the ribs are in. Everything's glued down. Everything's cured pretty good. So the next step for me on this is to come in and cut these channels even with the bottom of the car. Now that's pretty simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the mill upside down, come in with a cutter bit, make sure the cutting bit is cutting towards the car. So if I cut away from the car, it might strip the channel off. So if it's cutting towards the car, it's pressing the rib towards the car. So I need it to spin in this way. So I need to feed it this way. So I'll get that done and come back and see what the car looks like. And there we have it. I've got the channels all trimmed even with the bottom of the sill. So that takes care of modifying this side of the car. I still have to do this side of the car. So I'll get this side of the car done, and then we'll move on to the next step. Well, I hope you like the camera angle now, the way I have it set up. I think it shows a lot better what I'm working on, and I'll be able to do some in-process work and show it at the same time. So as you saw in the last clip, I got the channel all in on this side. I'll go ahead off camera and get the channel in on this side. Once that's done, we'll come back and do a little bit more work on the car. There's not a lot left to do. In the next video, we'll work on a little bit of wire bits. Here, one on the end, same for the other side, and I have to put the brake wheel on. And so I hope you enjoyed that bit of video, and I look forward to getting this car done. And if you stayed with me this long, thank you very much.